Black Star Pirate Radio.
St. Marie checks in at 60 degrees and clear. Airflow is west at about 8 miles per hour. Deputy Premier Ben Carroll confirms he will stand against Victorian Premier Jacinta Allen, a move challenging the very foundations of party solidarity. This isn't just a political skirmish, it's a test of civic architecture, a moment where the internal scaffolding of governance either holds firm or buckles under pressure. It speaks directly to our core principle, asserting unwavering autonomy in the face of shifting external pressures.
Mr. Carroll declared his leadership bid to the Labour Party caucus, informing Premier Allen directly this past Monday. Reports indicate a significant block of members of Parliament subsequently communicated their withdrawal of support from Allen, exposing Premier Allen's precarious grip on the party and potentially the entire state government. Concrete facts. This challenge follows a period of declining approval ratings for Allen, partly attributed to recent controversies surrounding infrastructure project cost blowouts and perceived indecision on contentious social policies, such as the proposed ban on gas connections in new homes. Who is affected? Beyond the political elite, Victorian citizens face potential policy paralysis and instability, particularly concerning the state's budget, ongoing public services, and major infrastructure initiatives. Public sector unions might see their negotiated agreements jeopardized by a new administration, and businesses reliant on state contracts could experience significant uncertainty, impacting investment confidence. A direct alternative to this closed-door challenge would be for the party to immediately initiate a pre-scheduled all-member leadership ballot, allowing every eligible party member a direct vote. This ensures broader party consent and transparency, elevating the provenance of leadership beyond mere backroom deals and sudden caucus coups.
The balancing act between established authority and the evolving consent of a governing body defines the current political climate in Victoria. The trade-off is stability versus responsiveness, like a ship's rudder fighting a rogue wave. Who carries the mandate forward is now in question. This internal tremor highlights how the structural integrity of a political party, often assumed, can be eroded by a lack of perceived public or internal dignity. It's a clash between the logical necessity of a unified front and the emotional demands for accountability and fresh direction, revealing a fundamental challenge in integrating these complementary vectors.
This isn't just about personalities. It's a symptom of a systemic flaw in how political power is transferred and legitimized within established parties. The current system often favors internal machinations over a clear, consent-driven process, creating a structural vulnerability that can lead to sudden, destabilizing shifts. It undermines the very idea of transparent governance and the dignity of the electorate. We must discern the toxic residue of backroom politics from the architectural signal of legitimate succession.
Patching in a caller, the skeptic. You're on the signal.
So, just another politician being replaced then. Does any of this actually change anything for us on the street?
The neon tube flickers, the color of a wound that won't close, and the room holds its breath for a second. A fair and critical question, caller. When leadership shifts internally, the policy agenda can pivot significantly, affecting everything from infrastructure projects to social programs. For instance, the Melbourne Metro Rail Tunnel, a massive public works project currently underway, could face re-evaluation, significant delays, or even cancellation under new leadership, impacting thousands of jobs, billions in public funds, and the daily commute of hundreds of thousands of Melburnians. Other areas like climate change initiatives, healthcare reforms, or even education funding could also see drastic changes in direction or funding. Our chosen next move experiment for Victoria: push for a public forum on leadership transition protocols, using the gig passport mesh to aggregate citizen input on what constitutes legitimate political succession. This isn't just a poll. It's an architectural signal, aiming to build a more transparent, consent-driven civic framework that ensures political dignity, allowing citizens to actively shape the provenance of their leadership beyond election day, turning confusion into actionable vectors.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu publicly dismissed International Criminal Court war crime charges as bogus and maintains his intent to attend the United Nations General Assembly in New York later this year. Mayor Mamdani, however, issued a public statement urging authorities to apprehend Netanyahu should he arrive on U.S. soil, directly exposing the International Criminal Court's (ICC) limited enforcement power against non-signatory states like Israel and the U.S.'s complex diplomatic immunity policies. Concrete facts. The ICC prosecutor issued arrest warrants against Netanyahu and his defense minister for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza, including starvation as a method of warfare and intentionally directing attacks against civilians. The U.S., while not a signatory to the Rome Statute, has a complicated stance, generally supporting the ICC's mission, but vehemently opposing its jurisdiction over its own citizens or allies. Who is affected? This standoff directly affects the credibility of international law and the victims of alleged war crimes who seek justice and dignity. It also creates a diplomatic minefield for the U.S. State Department and places Mayor Mamdani under intense political scrutiny, potentially impacting future international relations for New York City itself and creating friction within the UN host agreement. A viable alternative for addressing alleged war crimes, instead of relying solely on national arrest warrants against a visiting head of state, would be to expand the jurisdiction and enforcement mechanisms of the ICC through a binding UN Security Council resolution, compelling cooperation from member states. Alternatively, establishing an ad hoc international tribunal specifically for this conflict, mirroring the former Yugoslavia model, could ensure specific focus and resources, emphasizing the provenance of justice.
The tension between international legal mandates and the practicalities of national sovereignty creates a critical trade-off here. It's a clash between global justice and diplomatic immunity, a modern-day Gordian knot with no easy cut. Who holds the moral authority in this standoff remains undefined, revealing a deep structural fissure in our global architecture. This isn't just about legal definitions. It's about the emotional and ethical imperative to uphold dignity for all, even when political logic dictates caution. We must integrate logic and emotion as complementary structural vectors, not rival powers, in pursuit of justice.
The global legal architecture faces inherent friction when confronting claims of sovereign immunity, especially concerning international tribunals. Mayor Mamdani's stance, though locally focused for New York, illuminates the structural gaps between the ideals of universal justice and the realities of state power. It forces us to confront the hypocrisy of a system that can prosecute some while shielding others, eroding faith in global institutions and the dignity of international law. To reveal a better system, our chosen next move is to initiate a global jurisdiction by consent campaign, leveraging digital platforms and decentralized autonomous organizations to collect 1 million citizen petitions. These petitions would call for the universal adoption of the ICC's jurisdiction, thereby creating a new, consent-driven legal framework that transcends diplomatic immunity for severe human rights violations. This is about building provenance through direct citizen action, using clear analysis to turn global confusion into actionable vectors for accountability.
Call is on. Go ahead.
So, are we just going to keep seeing these global leaders accused but nothing ever really happens? What's the real cost if Netanyahu just shows up and nothing changes?
A crucial question, caller. The cost of inaction isn't just moral. It profoundly erodes the very concept of international law and the dignity of victims seeking justice. It potentially emboldens other actors to disregard human rights conventions, leading to further instability and conflict as states believe they can act with impunity. This erosion of global trust has tangible economic and social repercussions, making it harder to forge international cooperation on issues from climate change to pandemics, impacting global supply chains and humanitarian aid efforts. When the rule of law appears selective, the entire global architecture of consent begins to crack, undermining our collective ability to build resilient inner and civic structures. From the challenges of international law, we now shift to a different kind of global shift: the accelerating adoption of electric vehicles. Australia's roads are seeing a seismic shift, with EVs now almost a quarter of new car sales as the fuel crisis bites, challenging our entire energy infrastructure and consumer habits. This represents a monumental shift in our civic architecture, moving away from fossil fuel dependence towards a new electrified future. It's a prime example of practicing sharp discernment to separate toxic residue from architectural signal, seeing past the familiar to embrace the necessary.
The latest Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries data for Q3 shows 23.1% of new vehicle sales were EVs, a massive jump from just 3.8% 2 years ago, with projections for Q4 pushing past 25%. This surge exposes the unpreparedness of Australia's national electricity market grid for peak charging demands, particularly in suburban areas, risking localized blackouts or grid instability during evening peaks. It also puts immense pressure on traditional petrol stations, potentially leading to job losses among fuel retailers and service station attendants in regional towns, further challenging local economies already grappling with population shifts. Concrete facts: the Australian government's national EV strategy aims for 50% of new car sales to be EV by 2030, but current charging infrastructure growth rates lag significantly behind vehicle adoption, with only 3,000 public fast chargers nationally. Who is affected? Homeowners face higher electricity bills and potential need for costly panel upgrades for faster home charging. Regional communities risk being left behind without adequate public charging, exacerbating the urban-rural divide. Energy providers grapple with significant investment in grid modernization and demand management. A viable alternative to solely relying on grid expansion is to rapidly deploy bidirectional charging, vehicle-to-grid, or V2G incentives for EV owners, turning their vehicles into distributed energy storage assets. This would allow EVs to feed power back into the grid during demand peaks, stabilizing the system and potentially generating income for owners, effectively transforming a potential problem into a dynamic solution that builds local energy provenance and resilience.
This isn't just a car sale trend. It's a profound cultural rewiring, shifting from the iconic Aussie petrolhead driving culture to one of charge anxiety and range awareness. The image of the barbecue in the backyard is now joined by the silent hum of a car charging in the garage, fundamentally altering our daily energy rituals and communal infrastructure. The trade-off is the immediate convenience of a petrol pump versus the long-term sustainability and autonomy of electric power. It's an emotional attachment to the familiar, clashing with the logical imperative for change, requiring us to integrate both vectors for a resilient transition, ensuring the dignity of a sustainable future.
The tension here is between individual choice and systemic capacity, a digital age version of the old frontier where infrastructure always played catch-up. The structural gap is clear. Our energy grid, predominantly built for one-way power flow from centralized sources, is ill-equipped for the decentralized, fluctuating demands of millions of EVs. This creates friction and undermines the dignity of those without immediate access to reliable charging. To reveal a better system and build resilient inner and civic architectures that favor consent, provenance, and dignity, our chosen next move is to launch a decentralized energy nexus pilot program in 3 high EV adoption suburbs across different states, say Byron Bay, Fremantle, and Northcote. This program would subsidize community battery storage, smart grid infrastructure, and local peer-to-peer energy trading platforms, making charging an integrated, resilient part of the local energy ecosystem. This effectively gamifies energy independence for residents, turning them into active participants in their energy provenance rather than passive consumers, and using clear analysis to turn confusion into actionable vectors for a truly sovereign energy future.
There's a caller on the line.
So who's actually paying for all these charging stations and grid upgrades? And what about rural areas? Are they just getting left behind with this EV push?
Same dossier, new angle. Keep the thread tight.
Play the next move.
Black Star Pirate Radio.
Continue the signal at TogeeVision.com. Tune in, Sparks and Stories, Gig Passport.